All right, my name's Samuel Diller. I'm going to be doing a PowerPoint presentation on human-caused global climate change for Biology 101. So let's get right into it. For my introduction, I'm going to be talking about climate change and how it is one of the largest environmental challenges we face today. I'm going to address climate skepticism using scientific understanding and fact. And I'm going to talk about the importance of looking at evidence rather than opinions when it comes to climate change. So the first topic I want to get into is the greenhouse effect. What is the greenhouse effect? So the definition is a natural process that warms the earth. And I have here a picture that shows a diagram of how the greenhouse effect kind of works, right? So the sun, it shines on the earth, right? And most of the radiation is absorbed by the earth's surface and warms it. But we have an atmosphere around the earth, right? So some of the infrared radiation passes through the atmosphere and is absorbed and re-emitted in all directions by the greenhouse molecules that are in the atmosphere. The effect of this is to warm the Earth's surface and the lower atmosphere, but the problem that we face is that um, sometimes it's not as beneficial as you would think. So why am I even talking about this? Why does it matter? So this is how fossil fuels disrupt the carbon cycle. Fossil fuels store carbon underground for millions of years, right? This is our, basically our carbon matter that passed away many millions of years ago and turned into our fossil fuels. So we burn coal and oil and gas, and it releases a large amount of this CO2 back into the atmosphere. And this increases atmospheric CO2. It's been happening since the Industrial Revolution, right? So you might think, why does this matter? Well, the carbon cycle is like any cycle, right? It has input, it has output, it has different stages. And whenever you introduce a large amount of one part of the stage, it throws off the rest of the parts of the stages, right? It's just like how we look at the food pyramids, right, or the food map, and too much of one animal is not good. So let's get into the greenhouse effect. CO2, methane, and nitrogen are some of our gases that are in the atmosphere that are involved in the greenhouse effect. And, what are some major ecological effects of the greenhouse effect? We have rising global temperatures. So think about it like a blanket, okay? If you have a blanket over your body, you're pretty comfortable, right? If it's, you're indoors. But if you start introducing 3 or 4 or 5 blankets, this is kind of the same analogy as the um, gases in the atmosphere, right? You have too much, then it becomes too hot. This causes a direct effect on glaciers, causes melting, which affects the sea levels. It also causes the ocean to warm, and it causes coral bleaching, which is basically coral reef dying, which is not good, as we know. It also shifts habitats and species, and it causes species to migrate. We see this in a lot of countries where, um, you know, emissions and greenhouse gases are not regulated like they are in the United States. That being said, we do still see this a lot in the United States. Human health concerns. So how does this affect humans? The first thing that comes to mind is heat-related illnesses, like heat stroke, heat cramps, heat exhaustion. This is because rising global temperatures, um, you know, cause a human to be able to do less but feel more. It's like doing the same activity at 110 degrees versus 70 degrees. We have a limit. So this has also spread mosquito-borne diseases. Mosquitoes love heat and they love humidity, which warmer climates bring both. And it also increases the air pollution and respiratory issues like asthma. A lot of people don't think about it, but if anybody's ever traveled to a different country where emissions are not as regulated, like China, for instance, which is a very large outputter of greenhouse gases, you know that the air quality is just lower. It really is, and it's not even up for debate. It just is lower, and that's why a lot of people, they have filters and whatnot to try to combat it for their indoors, but that's just the reality of it. So what are some solutions though? So our technological solutions are, for one, we can use renewable energy such as solar and wind power, but there's also hydro and some other ones, right, that we can use, but these are our main two. And these help us reduce our dependency on fossil fuels, right? So even if 10% of, engines, machines that ran on fossil fuels were changed to solar or wind power, right? That would cause a large dent in the greenhouse gases that are being outputted into the atmosphere, and it would actually be a lot more beneficial than you would think. Carbon capture and storage is another one. This is the capture of CO2 from power plants and basically putting the carbon into the ground so it cannot be released. This one is really helpful as well, but the problem is that a lot of plants aren't motivated to do this unless they're forced to by the government. So, I think that it should be more of a thing where they want to, not like they have to, but unfortunately that's not the case. And my last example is going to be electric vehicles, which are very beneficial, right? Once they're created, they put out no emissions. Um, but the problem is the charging and the creation of the batteries is almost just as bad whenever the energy comes from coal. Now, if the energy came from nuclear, it would be a totally different story, but unfortunately, it just doesn't a lot of the time. So, what can we take from this? My conclusion. Scientific evidence strongly supports human-caused climate change. I just proved this through the previous slides. Ecological and health impacts are already visible with the rising temperatures and lowered air quality. And technological innovation offers realistic ways to reduce our impact, right? Like the examples I just stated. So, even though we already, have a foot out the door, we're not quite out there yet. And, I think in the next 10, 20 years, there really will be a change in the motivation people have to try to halt this problem. So I appreciate you watching my uh, PowerPoint, and I hope you have a good day.